Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Before we get started, this is the trigger warning. This is a horror podcast. We talk about bad things. I mean, we don't really talk about bad things, but it's horror stuff, so it could delve into subjects that are sensitive subjects, such as...
Never know.
You don't know. So, listener discretion is advised?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
To like viewer, yeah.
Yes. Parental advisory sticker.
Yes.
Yeah, with that out of the way. Steve, what do we got?
We've got 3 events going on weekly on Discord. We stream our episodes and chat about them. Chris has a webcomic called Pieces, which you can find at piecesofflesh.com. He live streams himself working on the comic. And we also do stream movies on Saturdays. You can find links to our Discord server on horrormakesushappy.com. It's on the front page right there. Also going to be trying to hit a couple different conventions over the next couple months. PopCon, I think, is next week, actually. I got to get tickets for that. That's in Louisville. There's one in Frankfort, Kentucky called Kentucky Horror Fest. One in Pittsburgh called WPA Cryptid and Supernatural Convention. And Scarefest in Lexington. So
you guys got a lot out there. I'm just planning on going to Spooky in October, but damn, you should have moved to Ohio. Yeah.
Well, these are 2 or 3 hour drives, so it's about as far from you as Orlando would be. But I wanted to try to hit all the ones that are within a 2 or 3 hour drive first before looking at stuff that's further away, because there are a lot of stuff in the Midwest, actually.
Yeah.
But I think that covers it. So today we are talking to Mr. Paul Lubaczewski, author best known for his works I Never Eat Cheesesteak. Surprisingly, that is a horror novel. Also, Cult of the Gator God and The New Life. Welcome, Paul.
Howdy.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Before we get into the meat of the interview, you want to let us know what you're currently working on?
Well, current book that is out now is Droplets, which is a collection from St. Rooster Books. And I have one of the shorts in the Macmillan anthology, The Haunted States of America. Matter of fact, I was just doing a signing on that yesterday.
Cool.
I like the title.
Yeah.
It's middle grade, which is, it was supposed to be only middle grade authors, and they needed somebody for West Virginia, so they reached out to the HWA, and, well, I live in West Virginia, so I got to be the lone horror author in a horror anthology.
Nice.
Cool. Well, I think I met you at StokerCon, not this last one, but the one before that, actually. So it's been a little while since we talked. So as a refresher, generally the gist of this interview is going to be less about your body of work and more about you and your love of horror as a fan. Of course, your stuff might come up here and there as we go, but what we do is break it down into 3 or 4 sections. We talk about your childhood, adolescence, and then adult years, and then at the end we'll talk about any common themes that have cropped up and how those might intersect with horror as a genre. But that said, it's not meant to be a therapy session, so if there's anything that you don't want to answer, you just say pass and we'll move on. But starting with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
My mom was big into horror, so like every Halloween she'd read me Sleepy Hollow.
Okay. Nice. It's a classic.
And then like every year, like either PBS or the local station would run Dracula. So we'd like do after the trick or treating, watch Dracula. Then on top of that, Philly, like back then, was a great place to get into horror. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had Dr. Shock on 17 every Saturday afternoon, but then on 48 we also had Creature Double Feature. Mm. So you had your choice of horror, and like parents paid no attention because they're running on Saturday afternoon. It's got to be fine.
Yeah. Right.
Meanwhile, they're running like all the goriest Hammer films and stuff. And it's like,
nice.
Sure, it's fine, Mom.
It's black and white.
Well, these were in glorious red color.
Oh,
the right stuff.
Yes. Yeah, and it's like, well, no, Mom, that nightmare was totally coincidental.
Had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, from there, I moved on to Poe. We had a copy of the Rackham edition of Tales of Mystery and Imagination. And my mom accused me of only looking at the illustrations. She was right. I wasn't going to admit to that. So I said, no, I'm reading it. So she told me if I could write her a book review on any of the stories in there, I'd keep it. If not, leave it the hell alone. I still have it to this day.
Nice. Showed her.
Yeah.
In fact, I have 3 of the pieces from 3 of the Rackham pieces tattooed on my shoulders.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
So I guess let's start with Sleepy Hollow. What'd you like about that?
Oh, it seems like old timey now, but like the tension build on the ride is, right. I mean, especially for the time period, it's absolutely magnificent, even to this day. I mean, which is why it still lends itself to film adaptations, because it's got a nice high tension moment.
Mm.
You know, I think I saw the Burton version 3 times.
Mm-mm.
It's been a while for me. We used to watch that all the time when I was a kid, but I honestly can't think of any details of it at the moment, other than there was a guy with no head
on a horse.
Bunches of people.
Yep.
Christopher Walken is, well, he's Christopher Walken in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Christina Ricci.
I actually haven't seen that version. I should.
You've got that on one of those DVDs you found, don't you?
No, the Tim Burton one that I found, I think was Corpse Bride, actually.
Ah, yes.
So what'd you like about Dracula?
That one has just creeping menace all the way through it. Even the Lugosi original, he just sells you on the creep factor. I think the last film that scared me, it was as a kid, it was Dracula Prince of Darkness. I was like 8. And it's just like there's an opening scene there where like the female character in it is trapped and doesn't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so well built, and it's so just menace and doom and creep.
Was there a favorite story in the Tales of Mystery and Imagination?
At the time, I think, Telltale Heart has always been a favorite. But as I've gotten older, I've really come to appreciate Hop Frog. And for that matter, Mask of the Red Death.
Mm-hmm.
They both have very, dare I say, progressive values in them.
Yeah.
I mean, in both cases, it's the well-heeled who think they can do everything they want, getting theirs in the end, proving that, no, you can't.
Yeah. It's funny. I have, I can't think of the right term for it, but it's like a collected works of Edgar Allan Poe.
Compendium?
No, not really. But Hop Frog isn't ringing a bell.
It's a midget, like juggler, like, a
jester.
Yeah, jester overall, but juggler mainly. And he falls in love with a little ballerina, and the king and his court torment him all the time, and that he can live with. But when they start tormenting the ballerina,
yeah, this is starting to ring a bell now.
Yeah, he convinces them that the latest thing is to be covered in tar and fur to play orangutan, and it's a merry jest. And then as soon as he gets them all dipped into the tar and fur, he pulls them all up into a net of chains and lights it on fire.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. That gets it done.
And then he's never seen him and the ballerina are never seen again.
Of course.
Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, the Rackham edition is just beautiful. Arthur Rackham was like one of the premier illustrators of like the turn of the 20th century into the 1920s. And his stuff is it's beautifully done. I mean, he also did a really famous edition of Alice in Wonderland, Grimm's Fairy Tales. So, like, very famous illustrator, and the work he did on the Poe edition is just beautiful.
Nice.
So, yeah, my mom was right. I was looking at the illustrations.
Well, I was going to say that Hop Frog and Mask of the Red Death both have comeuppance, but I guess that's also kind of true for Telltale Heart, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think in that case, that almost has a Dostoevsky Crime and Punishment feel of he couldn't help it. The heart gets revenge on him, but to some degree, he was just driven to madness. Where in Mask and Hop Frog, now this is just a case of somebody who thinks he's above it all being a jerk. Because remember, in Telltale, it's the guy's eye just drives him out of his mind.
Yeah.
And that's like in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. It's like he doesn't mean to kill anybody. He just feels driven to it, and it just happens. And it's that same feeling of like just madness overcame me, and now I have to live with the consequences. Where in the other two, it's no, you had options. You had plenty of options. You went for big fat jerk, and look what it got you.
Yeah. So you mentioned that Dracula Prince of Darkness was the last movie that scared you as a kid. What was on the other side of that dividing line? I
went from being scared by horror films to just they're cool to me. It's like, I guess there was a degree of I thought they were cool when I was a kid, but at some point they stopped scaring me, and it's just like there was the cool factor to them. And I tend to I like a lot of films that are just really cool and really artfully done. I mean, I can do splatter with the best of them, but like I also really appreciate like really good filmmaking. And I think that's like why as an adult, I've actually like I tend to get my splatter from France more than America anymore, because like there's so much more there. It's not just a one trick pony.
Yeah, that in France, I don't know. Their thriller and horror movies are just different. Like there's one that I saw recently that I don't know if you could even call it a horror film, but had some gore to it, and it was interesting, and definitely a sci-fi or fantasy angle. Steve, I think I brought it up, and you said you had seen it already earlier that year, Animal Kingdom.
Yes.
Okay, I haven't seen that one. I've been hearing buzz on it, but I haven't seen it yet.
It's good.
But I mean, if you look at their like gore, like Frontiers or Martyrs, there's so much more happening in those films than just there's going to be a lot of blood.
Yeah.
Frontiers is it's an outright condemnation of the Le Pen family.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Was that related to or based on true events?
It's basically, I think the idea behind it is this is where this leads.
Okay.
Like that creepy family is where this mindset is like that's the end result. That's where you're going to end up every freaking time. And I mean, historically, there's some accuracy to that, but really, when the director did the film, he was going directly after the Le Pens and their political legacy in France. So it's like when you compare that to like just a straight splatter film, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of splatter in Frontiers. That is a bloody, bloody film. But there's also an underlying, and it's almost kind of reminiscent of like the earlier splatter books, James Rath White and Brian Keene, where they were also going for something else, not just a body count.
Mm-hmm. It's good to have a nice plot in addition to all the gore and violence,
I like to think so.
Well, let's. I made a note about Frontiers, and we can come back to that. But I'm guessing you probably didn't see that until you were much older.
Oh yeah.
So, you said your mom was a fan of horror.
Yep.
Or was she just a fan of, I want to say, the old stuff like Sleepy Hollow? Or
she tended to gravitate toward like the classics. I mean, like the Universal stuff and films like that. She tended to enjoy. I can't recall her ever watching anything particularly gory. I just remember her looking the other way when I did.
Okay.
And then like the 80s was like the gore boom, but there were also a lot of smart films in that decade. And it's funny because they always did worse at the box office, but it sort of made them the underdogs in my mind. And so I kind of rooted for them. It's like everybody wanted to see Tobe Hooper do another Texas Chainsaw, so he dropped Life Force.
Huh. He did do Life Force, didn't he?
Yes, he did Life Force. He did Poltergeist. He did Funhouse. He did Eaten Alive, and he did Texas Chainsaw. Oh yeah, and Invaders from Mars.
Huh. Did you see Life Force as a child, or did that come later?
I was a teenager.
Okay. Did you participate in Halloween as a child?
Oh heck yeah.
Do you have a favorite costume?
I can't for the life of me remember any of my costumes because it was like back in the 70s where like there were all these plastic things. So you had this plastic like shirt thing that had a picture of whatever you were supposed to be.
Yep.
And this
Ben Cooper costumes.
Yeah. And this mask you couldn't see out of.
Right.
Yeah. Like, why would you put a picture of the thing that you're wearing on your shirt?
Yes, it would say like, if you had an Iron Man costume, it would be a big picture of Iron Man and it would say Iron Man. It's like,
it would say Iron Man. Like, oh, who are you dressed up as? Give me a candy.
Casper, I got the costume really wrong.
Oh.
Yeah, right. Did you have any scary dreams as a kid or reoccurring nightmares?
No, I wouldn't say reoccurring. I mean, I remember one when, like, I think right after I saw Curse of the Werewolf, starring Oliver Reed, where, like, I woke up in my bed and my family was down the hall being slaughtered by a werewolf. I remember that one because I woke up, like, wide awake from that.
Yeah, no shit.
And I kept my mouth shut when I woke up, too, because it's like, nope, I'm not having Creature Double Feature taken from me. No.
Nice.
The correct move here is to keep that to your full self.
It's funny because I thought you were going to say that you were like still in dream mode and you didn't want to be killed by the werewolf, but that's a whole different level of awareness. I like that.
I thought you were going to say like I didn't want to jinx it by mentioning it, and then I would have more dreams about it, or by some superstitious bet that it would happen. But you're like, no, I just didn't want to, jeopardize the horror movies.
Right.
The important stuff.
I'm not jeopardizing my Saturday afternoon just because my subconscious is stupid.
Right. Was there ever a time in your childhood when you were terrified of something in real life?
Lots. Childhood was pretty rough.
Mm.
My mom had her first nervous breakdown when I was 7. There was no dad there, so yeah, there was the early years were really rough. I think like horror movies were like one of my solaces because like anything bad that happens in a horror movie, well, you turn the TV off, and that goes away.
Mm.
You could control an aspect of bad things because like the TV, you could look away, you could turn it off. Real life, you're stuck with it.
Right.
That is true. Flipping that question around, was there ever a time in your childhood when you felt completely calm or safe or bliss?
Usually on my own. Like, I mean, I used to ride, like my bike was like freedom.
Mm.
I could go anywhere, I could do anything. And like we used to ride, like before there was BMX.
Schwinn.
Way, way back in the dawn of way back. We used to take our like Schwinn Stingrays and like take them on motocross trails and in our minds, the trails went forever and ever and ever and stuff like that. And it's just like, and God, I can remember the racket those things made. Like to this day, I can hear the chain guards just slamming every time we go over a jump.
Yep.
And I mean, that was the thing, it's like your bike, man, that was the ultimate in freedom. You could put distance. Yeah.
So my mom's side of the family is from Philly. Dad's side's from Chicago. Mom's side's from Philly. And I had some family that was just outside of the city, but we also lived in the city proper for a while too. And so when you said Philly, I was thinking more central city. But when you mentioned riding the bikes and trails and whatnot, then clearly that's not dead center city. So kind of what?
Yeah, I've lived in Philly, like all over the place in Philly. And it's funny, like I'm from there. I was born there. And I still have an accent, which humors my friends who weren't from there.
Mm.
But like, I kind of enjoy Philly better from a distance now.
Mm.
Like now it cracks me up. Like, when Philly acts like Philly, I find it funny. But like when you have to live there, it's just
right.
It's a different experience, viewing it outside of it than in it. Yeah. I live in Florida, so I get it.
Yeah.
I've lived all over the country, and like I joke about it. It's like why I live in West Virginia is because after 30 years of life, it finally dawned on me, I hate cities.
Yeah.
It's like I've born in Philadelphia. I've lived in Allentown, New York City, Los Angeles, Jacksonville, Florida. And then it's at some point, it just dawned on me, I hate living in a city.
There are things I like about it. There are things I like both. I currently live outside of I don't want to say outside of a city, but more of a suburban area, I guess.
Yeah.
But I can relate. There are things that pros and cons to each, I guess.
I guess like now I like the concept of I can drive to a city and then leave.
Yeah. Right. It's good to have access to them, but not not live in them.
On the downside, the place that I currently live only has 2 liquor stores, and they both close at 7 p.m. Which
you're the one who decided to move to Ohio. I don't know what you're thinking there. That's
actually worse than Pennsylvania, and
I know.
You're shocked, like, wow, there's actually something worse than Pennsylvania.
No, the Liquor Control Board in PA, like, they're notoriously, like, just always, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't know that about Ohio before I moved here. I moved here for work, and had I known, I may have considered, because the Ohio Liquor Board is just crazy. If you're, I mean, here's the thing. Like, if you like the stuff that other people in the state like, that's great. But I happen to prefer certain rums that people around here don't drink rum. That was like more of a Florida thing. And it's impossible to get certain things here. You can't even order it. Can't special order it. I literally have to leave the fucking state to go buy the stuff and bring it home if I want it, which is just stupid and insane to me. But
I'm going to recommend my friends from Pennsylvania who have complained about the LCB there for decades listen to this podcast, because you don't know how well how good you have it.
Right.
Yeah, the closest place that there's like a liquor store on the other side of the river in Cincinnati, which is, I think, 2 hours from here. So yeah, if I want certain kind of flavored rum that I really like, I have to drive 2 hours to get it. Anywho, so the next two questions are also in a pair. Going to ask the negative ones first so we can end on the positive. Do you remember the first person you hurt?
Probably not the first, but I used to get in fights in elementary school all the time.
Okay.
So if we're going like physical, I mean, I spent a lot of my elementary school against the wall.
Okay.
And it wasn't even that I meant to hurt anybody. It was more that the adrenaline rush of it, you know, and it's just, well, but if you're going to get into a fight, guess what? You're going to end up hurting somebody. And it's like, now I am like completely against violence. Like there are other ways to get that same adrenaline rush, but when you're a kid and you just don't think better or know better, it's like, yeah, I think I remember punching somebody in the stomach at 7, and then like going down because I knocked the wind out of them. And it's like, you know, I spent a lot of time in the punk scene, and I saw a lot of violence from that. And that's kind of left me with, you know, it's so idiotic.
Can be, yes.
You know, I mean, I'm still of the opinion that, like, you know, Nazis are fair game, but
the most punchable of faces.
Yeah, that's sort of, I think there might be something to the fact that my last name went from being very, very common to about 400 instances of it in the world. So there might be some like base prejudice against Nazis there.
Yeah, it's funny you brought that up, because I had commented to Chris, I had seen some pictures of you wearing a kilt, and I said to him, I said, I wonder if he's half Polish, half Scottish, or if he's into the punk scene.
Punk scene. There you go.
And then I said, or maybe both.
Punk scene.
Yeah.
Also, on a steamy hot day in Pittsburgh, kilt was comfortable.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Chris
is getting ideas.
I mean, it's pretty fucking hot in Florida. Thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I lived in Jacksonville. Florida heat, like getting out of a car in Florida is like getting hit by a wall.
It's so awesome right now in August.
On the flip side, wearing a kilt getting into a car.
Ooh. Yeah, if you have black leather interior. Ooh.
You learn to be careful.
I bet.
So flipping that last question around, do you remember the first person you helped?
So that's the thing. I was kind of raised to be helpful. So like I can't it's in both cases. It's just, you know, if you view how I was raised, especially in the 70s, because kids were expected to fight back then. You know, at the same time, I was raised with the idea of you have to help.
Yeah,
like it all functions if you help. So like I can't even. I'd have an even harder time with that one because it was just like you were expected to, you know, from a young age, like even help around the house. You were supposed to, you know, vacuum clean your room, clear the dishes, and that was just manners.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you saw someone hurting, you know, of course you help. That's just, you know, that's what you're supposed to do.
Okay. Going into teen years, if you were to pick maybe the top 2 or 3 things that stood out to you as being impactful in the horror genre in your teen years, what would those be?
Brian Lumley. Film wise is hard. That's just, the 80s was a weird decade that way. Actually, going back and watching Hitchcock films, I think that would be a huge impact because you learn all the camera angles everybody else uses. If you go back, like for every 80s slasher flick, if you want to know where the killer's coming from, go back and watch Hitchcock because they're stealing his camera angles.
Use a lot of like push pulls and Dutch angles.
Yeah, no, like you can tell like with the sound and with the camera angle where it's going to come from because it's a Hitchcock angle.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go back and like watch like, you know, The Birds and Psycho and, you know, any of his stuff, those angles are going to show up in almost all of your, because that's what they learn from, you know. And God, a third thing. Horror rock, horror punk.
Okay.
Bands like The Damned, 45 Grave, but The Misfits is the obvious one.
Yeah.
But there were so many more. Christian Death, you know, Psychobilly, The Meteors. I mean, like all of that stuff. Like I still listen to most of it today. I don't listen to The Misfits as much just because it's become one of those I've heard it too much.
Yeah, that does happen.
You know, for 40 years of hearing Skulls is, you know, it's kind of dulled the impact a little bit. But God, I remember when the Wolf's Blood Earth AD album came out and just being blown away by how fast, like, because the Misfits were like, you know, a kind of rock and rolly band. And so that album comes out and they're just full blown thrash, you know, and I was just amazed by it, you know, and it's like, but like I said, it's like I've listened to that stuff so many times. And now it also gets picked up elsewhere. Like, you know, when it's your little thing, that's one thing if you listen to it a lot. But when, you know, you're seeing ads for rum on TV and it's playing Where Angels Dare, it starts to get a bit old.
Yeah.
Was there a particular Brian Lumley book that stood out to you?
When Necroscope broke, that book took over everything. I mean, with that Eggleton.
Well, hang on. I'm not asking about popularity in the world. I'm saying for you, was there a particular thing?
To this day, I mean, those Necroscope books, I mean, so that's like late teens, but still that first Necroscope book and just that series, I think it's just still, you know, he managed to take a really old, like he managed to make a really old style vampire book and still make it completely different from everybody else. Like it's Eastern European, it's got like all the little cliches, and he still manages to turn it on its ear. And that cover, that still to this day is still, I love that series. I love that book.
Was there some specific element of that first book that really stood out to you?
Like I said, he goes in with all of the normal cliche trappings of a vampire book. And then he adds in the whole talking to the dead part. He adds in like the mushroom aspect of it all. And he takes like the typical vampire, like almost cliche vampire, and flips it. Like
what I'm trying to get at is like you're talking about the accoutrements, but I'm saying, is there something about the story specifically that spoke to you?
Well, actually, it is the accoutrements. Because, well, actually, it's also part of the story too. It's like the whole, like when I grew up, I read all of those James Bond books, like the early ones, the Ian Fleming ones. So he's got like an Ian Fleming style spy story going. He's got a typical vampire story going, but then he's changing the elements so much that it captures the imagination at the time. Because it's like you're getting what you're used to, but you're not either. You know, and I've always loved, you know, filmmakers and authors that could understand the rules of the genre and then break them anyway.
So this is a good example of something that has come up in previous calls where there's a difference between loving something as an auteur and loving something because it says something to you personally, maybe in a story because of the story or some element of the story. Being a fan of something as an auteur is a good thing and it is its own thing, but at least for the purposes of what we're trying to do for our podcast, it seems to make more sense for us to focus on the things that kind of hit at the gut level, if that makes more sense. Whereas like the auteur stuff is more like cerebral, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there anything that really stood out to you in your teen years that hit you at that gut level?
Yeah, go back to the horror rock.
That's fine.
That was everything that spoke to me at a level of everything I was as a kid was still cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I liked early rock and roll. I liked horror movies. And then you have these, like, punk is really just at its base, stripped down rock and roll played faster.
Right.
So you have these bands playing early style rock and roll, which like in the 70s was on its deathbed. So I like fell in love with that first. And then on top of it, they're saying, you know what? Being the kid who ran home for Creature Double Feature, totally cool. It's cool like you wouldn't believe. And if the other people don't get it, the hell with them. They're not cool.
Mm.
You know, and that was right down at a very gut level. Like, you know, when you first hear, I mean, the Misfits, like half of their song titles are old Creature Double Feature movies.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I mean, yeah, their logo is, was it the Crimson Mask or the Crimson Ghost?
Yeah, Crimson Ghost from the old serials. You know, and then like, you know, songs like Die, Die, My Darling. Well, that's a Karloff film, Queen Wasp. You know, they're all like these horror films that like I watched, and it's just like it was everything I loved as a kid, and it's like it's all wrapped up in this newer, faster music that's being made right now, and that was like right down to the gut level. You know, films. Like there were a lot of films I liked, but I was trying to. At the time, it really was an auteur thing. I really wanted to see where people could take things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I was much more interested in the experimentation of it, seeing what you could do with it. And like, because I was exploring myself. I mean, that's like, you know, as a teenager, you're exploring your world and you're exploring like your own capabilities and what you think you can do. And you kind of want to see what other people are where other people are pushing the envelope. Though, I mean, there were some like the Italian guys they pushed, like if you don't cringe at the scene in Zombie where the eyeball scene,
mm-hmm.
God, you're stronger than me because that makes me cringe every time.
You mentioned earlier Life Force. I think you said you saw that in your teens?
Yeah.
What'd you like about it?
I mean,
God, it's just, you know, it's almost reminiscent of A Clockwork Orange. The way he paces and the way he feeds these like little lines in there here or there that are just cool. Matter of fact, the band that would become Mars, who like became really famous for Pump Up the Volume. Before that, they were a band called Colorbox, and they have a song called Hot Doggy, and it samples the hell out of Life Force. I mean, there are all kinds of Life Force quotes just sampled through there, and that's kind of like it was really cool because I mean, he also understood like the power of a really cool line dropped in a place. You know, like Mad Max films, or the first Mad Max film especially, is the same way. Like, you know, a really well delivered line will stick in your head and you'll walk away thinking about it later. Like not even thinking about it. Like, you know, it just, you'll walk out of there quoting it later.
Yeah. Certain films have a lot of those. I can't think of anything in Life Force off the top of my head, but
that was my next
question. I do know it was a
great
fucking movie. I mean, it's space, alien, vampire, zombies. How can you go wrong?
You can't. I mean, I have it in 4K now. I mean,
nice.
That is like absolutely one of my favorite films. And it's just, it's the idea of, I know the rules of filmmaking and I'm going to play with them. I mean, even if you go to like the realm of splatter, that's what made Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, so effective, is he knows all the rules of what you expect to have happen. And he is going to use them against you. Like, and that's why that ending is so effective, because it's not supposed to be the ending. You absolutely have a different ending in your head, and he drops that, and it just whomps you right in the head. And I think that's like one of the good things about learning like the history of your genre is you get to learn the rules, and you get to know what the audience expects, and it gives you the ability to play with them for more effect.
So did you have any costumes in your teen years that stood out to you as either your favorite or least favorite?
Now, once I hit mid-teens, I mean, I was into punk. So okay. I used to joke about it at the time. It's like, I'm wearing my costume every day.
Yep. Just get him up. An Toxic Avenger. Back off.
That kind of leads into the next question, too. You had mentioned, the punk scene and the violence. I was going to ask if that was, because we got the question about, did anything in real life terrify you? Was that the answer for that, or did you want to have something else that you wanted to give as an answer?
No, for the teen years, God, that's still, it's a mess. It's like, my home life is an absolute catastrophe, and I find something I'm really into, and there are other people, and then like the waves of violence in the 80s punk scene was just, it made, going to a show, you knew there would be a fight.
Yeah.
How bad it would be, and were you going to be in it, those were up for grabs, but whether or not there was going to be a fight, that was a foregone conclusion. You'd watch, people would go take runs at you. People would take runs at your friends. Sometimes friends would get hurt pretty bad. And then on top of it, at the time in the 80s, man, like the whole society was like dead set against us. So you almost couldn't like leave the scene, because if you were going to go be a punk rocker on your own, you were going to get jumped. Cops would be all over you.
You're saying it's in both directions. You were either with them or against them. It wasn't going to be fun.
Yeah. And like at the end of the day, it was a shame, because like when a good show happened where there wasn't any violence, you could see it's just like just a bunch of kids who were just trying to have fun. And, unfortunately, because of the aggression in the music, like some people really clued into it that they really were just thugs. Mm. And it's like, now that I'm older, I watch how they ended up, and it's like, oh, and that's where it all ends up. Good for you. Yeah.
Did you have any scary dreams or reoccurring nightmares in your teens?
Nah.
Okay. Any particular moments where you felt completely calm or safe or at bliss in your teens?
There was. It's not a band you would think I would say, but there was a 1987 Dead Milkmen show. And they had been on tour supporting their first album, and they had just gotten home, and they were happy to be home, and the crowd was perfect. It was a nice, fun, beautiful crowd. Not like just everybody was like, all the cool stuff about punk. Like, when somebody goes down in the pit, you pick them up right away. Nobody's stage diving that's like really shouldn't be. Nobody's like, just nice. It was really nice. And the band was having fun, and the band was happy to be home. And it was, I still think it was like one of the greatest shows I ever went to. And it's like, well, what made it special? It was just perfect teenage fun.
So moving into adult years then, let's see. You have mentioned so far Frontiers, Henry, Portrait of Serial Killer. I guess anything else that really has stood out to you in your adult years in terms of the genre?
Well, I first off, I'll hit horror music. Man, the international scene is amazing. It used to be like all England and LA mainly, and now, there are horror punk bands coming from everywhere, and so many of them are so good. You have like bands like Banane Metallique out of France. You have Voodoo Zombie out of Argentina, and there's just so like Sir Psycho and his Monsters, which are out of Austria. It's just like it's become this huge international community, and that is really cool. Literary wise, well, I write horror comedy, so of course I'm going to have to say the rise of that as a genre has been really fun to watch, and it's really fun to be part of. Where everybody else got their comedy version. early on, like sci-fi was like Douglas Adams, like 1979. And you had Terry Pratchett doing it for fantasy. And then, now you have like Christopher Moore, Jeff Strand, myself, Yim Gwei, and a bunch of other authors like hitting horror comedy. And it's like, if you love comedy and you love the genre, you can see where it's such fertile ground. And then on film, God, there's so many things that have happened. I think the international scene has just opened up so many cool avenues. I mean, you can have a film like Thirst come out of Korea. Then you can have, like there's been some really cool films coming out of like Southeast Asia. You have like the French films like Frontiers, Martyrs, and it's like, again, back in the 80s, like getting an international film was like very rare and, almost like unheard of. And now like you go on Netflix, you go on Shudder, and there's going to be like dozens of foreign films. And it's so cool to be able to see their takes on things, them playing with their own cliches that they have in filmmaking and seeing like them turn them on their head.
You mentioned Thirst specifically. What'd you like about it?
It had such an evil little sense of humor hunkering behind everything. I mean, it's a bloody film. It's gross in parts, but lurking behind it is just this evil little sense of humor the entire time. I mean, like the scene where he drags her out into the sun for the end of it, and she's just fighting him all the way. It's hilarious while poignant at the same time.
Why was it hilarious?
Because he plays it like a comedy, like a wacky, like an I Love Lucy sort of comedy bit, while at the same time, the main character is basically saying we shouldn't exist at all. I mean, like she climbs into the trunk of the car, he rips the lid off. He plays it. I mean, he plays it visually almost like an I Love Lucy bet.
I don't know that I've seen Thirst.
When you say we shouldn't exist at all, which way do you mean that? Because I haven't seen that, and there's a couple different ways I could interpret that.
Well, in this case, vampires.
Yeah, like
he comes to the opinion by the end of the film that like he goes from falling in love with this woman and bringing her into this life to realizing that they're unnatural and they shouldn't exist at all. And there is also the Japanese extreme movement, I think, in film saw where splatterpunk would go in America way before we did.
Yeah, like you mentioned, foreign horror being rare in the 80s. First thing that came to mind for me was Guinea Pig. That was 80s, wasn't it?
I don't know, but
thinking 90s.
Like where splatter has gone and gotten like decidedly silly in America as far as literary stuff goes.
Yeah.
They were doing that stuff in Asia. Like they had a movement of it that pretty much basically looked at the trauma films and went, hold my sake, I can do better.
Okay.
And it all kind of revolves around a director named Noboru Oguchi, because like not only was he the first kind of guy to kind of do that, he also trained a lot of the guys that would end up getting to be big stars in the entire genre. Like the guy who directed Tokyo Gore Police got his start doing special effects for Noboru Oguchi.
Okay, that tracks.
And yeah, Oguchi is mainly known in the States for Zombie Ass, which is really literally if you love a trauma film like Toxic Avenger or Nukem High or anything, then you have to watch Oguchi, because he takes their stuff and goes, oh no, I can be far more ridiculous and far gorier.
When you said Japan said to Troma, hold my beer, watch this, Zombie Ass is actually the first thing I thought of.
As it should be. I am a huge Oguchi fan, just because it's the same feeling I got the one year at the Gross Out contest at Scares when RJ Benetti entered for the first time. That same feeling the entire time of, oh, he can't be going further than this. He absolutely has hit his wall. And it turns out, nope. We got further we can go.
Mhm.
We are going to take this a lot further. Just watch me go. And watching an Iguchi film is that same feeling of, all right, this has got to be the wall. This has got to be
Right? Like, it can't get any more ridiculous than this. Oh my god, it just did.
yeah. Oh my God, it just did. Wow. I will be damned. And it's that, and God, it is such a joyful feeling because it's like you can feel the fun he's having of going, watch this, watch this, watch this. This is gonna be absolutely ridiculous. And like, I mean, God, you gotta have joy in life. And watching his films is like, the director and the people working on the script were giggling their butts off as they were writing this down the entire time. Like, and then trying to figure out after the fact, okay, how do we actually make this work on film?
If I were to summarize the last few minutes of the conversation, it sounds like it really is just all summed up in the thrill of crossing boundaries.
Yeah. I think as a creator, especially, the idea that there are boundaries is a bummer. Like, and I think our creativity can go so much further than we give it credit for. And I love people that go, oh, that's the line? Well, look at me. I'm over here on the other side of it.
I have a feeling I know what one of the possible outcomes as far as the summary of the call is going to be, Steve.
Well, hold that thought because we're not there yet. Has there ever been anything in real life that's terrified you as an adult?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do extreme sports. So I cave, I mountain bike, I hike, I kayak.
No caving. No, thank you. No caving.
Right.
You do that like caving where like you get into a spot where to get to the other chamber, you have to go through something that is the width of you, and that's it.
Done it.
No, thank you.
Actually, it's the enormous drops that usually get me.
Okay. Yeah, that's also terrifying. Yeah. I've seen Descent. I know how that goes.
Yeah, I've always joked about it. I'm not afraid of heights. It's the sudden fall
stop at the end.
Right. I'm not afraid of heights. I'm afraid of lows, drops.
And so sudden decelerations. That scared the hell out of me. But yeah, even a few years ago, I was getting out of a cave and I got hung up on the lip trying to ascend out of it. And I was so exhausted by the time I got out of there. But like that moment of realization that I couldn't get my ascender past the lip, that scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing of it. Like you're exhausted by the time you're getting out of the cave. So it makes it that much more difficult. It's that much more important because
then on top of it, the person on top side couldn't get any leverage to pull on the rope to even help me like pop over the lip. So I had to do it on main force.
Jesus.
And yeah, moments like that, they scare the hell out of you. But at the end of it, you're like, well, I am definitely alive.
Yeah, there's that.
There's a reason that they suggest that if you're going to go out for a run, that you run uphill first.
Mm-hmm.
I just completed a mountain bike race, and all the hills were three mountains at the back end of it. Like it's like it was in New River Gorge, and like the front of it's like all the stuff I like. We're flying techie stuff and going around corners. Okay, this is all stuff I like. In the back end, three massive hills.
This is going to be the filter.
Yeah,
beat out the week.
But it was such an elating feeling when I realized I was like halfway up the last hill. It's like I didn't die. Yay me!
Yeah.
Yay! We're gonna finish this and not collapse and die or have to have a doctor called or anything.
Right?
Yay!
It's a good segue into the follow-up question, which is: was there ever a time in your adult life when you felt exceptionally calm or safe or at bliss?
We didn't die.
that was actually a blissful moment. There's actually a lot of those too. I mean, God, like the first time you sell a book, like when you get that acceptance letter back and you realize, oh my God, I'm an author now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because short stories like feel like you're building to something, but you sell your first novel and you get that acceptance letter back and you just have this like all right, I like everything I've been working for. I've reached this point.
Mm-hmm.
God, birth of my son, when they handed him to me, and like that was absolutely a moment of, because I mean we'd been up all night, we weren't sure what was going to happen. There were some complications, and then they hand him to me, and again, this is 9 months plus the decision to have a kid, and there he is. Like any moment where you have a second to consider what you've achieved in life. I think those are some of the most, like not the exact moment after the payoff, but the moment after that where you can just sit back and just go, there. Mm-hmm. We've completed this. This is that moment between holy shit, we did it, and that moment that thing that our drive will hit us with a moment later of, okay, on to the next one. That little blissful moment right between the two where you can just sit back and go, that is actually, I mean, I think that's why people climb mountains. I think that's why people do extreme sports. I think that's why people write. It's not even for that yay achievement moment. It's just for that moment of, I can do something I set my mind to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Payoff.
Yeah, the personal payoff.
Yeah. The next two questions I'm going to ask are going to be over your entire life, and it's not just horror, so it could be any genre. What movie have you watched more times than any other?
Mad Max.
Okay.
Nice. The original?
Yeah. Bubba Zanetti is one of my favorite characters that has ever existed.
Bubba Zanetti. Which one was he?
The blonde one.
Ah, okay.
He does more with less. And I love that. I love that he doesn't. He only has a few lines, but every one of them hits like a freight train. Like when they bring the trashed car in, and the kids are jumping down, up and down on it. And one of them comes over, "Hey, Mister, what do you think happened to that car? Perhaps it was the result of anxiety." It's just such a brutal line, and it's just I just love that film. It's got so many great lines in it. I mean, the toe cutter is great in it. Jimmy the Goose is great in it. I say that all the time. Like the larger than life and twice as ugly. I use that line all the time.
Would you say Mad Max is your favorite film, or would you give that title to something else?
Actually, my favorite film of all time is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Okay.
Why?
Jimmy Stewart classic.
The never giving up aspect of it, and if you're trying to do good things for a good reason, not backing down, even no matter how much they try to beat you down. Mm-hmm. And I love that aspect of that. And I think that like trying to help people and trying to do the right thing, no matter what, I think that's an aspect that should be celebrated a little more.
Yeah.
And I got to see that film in a classic theater.
Oh, really? Like one of the old time theaters where they have like an actual stage and filigrees all over the balconies and shit.
I got to see it at the County Theater in Doylestown, PA.
Okay.
And that's actually one of my I love when they restore an older theater to like it's at least something approaching its former glory. I love going to see a film, like a classic film that would have played there.
Mm-hmm. It puts you in the experience. We have one here in Tampa, and it's just called the Tampa Theater. And yeah, it's been too long. I need to go see a movie there.
Actually, I got to see
great theater
at the Granada Theater in Bluefield, West Virginia, which absolutely was open at the time and would have run it. On Halloween night, I got to see the original Dracula with Lugosi.
Nice.
And that was sweet. Took my son with that, and I was just like, this is perfection here.
Mm.
That's like one of my rules. If a classic film I like is playing it at a classic theater, absolutely go, and always see Godzilla on the big screen if you can.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you see any common threads about what kinds of horror you like? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical?
Honestly, no. I mean, I think that, again, comes from wanting to see all the films that had been done before.
Mm.
No one genre, like the genre of that was popular in my youth didn't overshadow everything. Because like the 80s was definitely the slasher era, but it didn't become my primary. Like I can watch a good slasher film, but it's not like my primary film genre. Mm-hmm. No matter how many Fangorias I've read, which was probably most of them from 1982 to 1987 inclusive. You know, I'll watch a great, like The Uninvited with Ray Milland is a great ghost story. And at the same time, again, we mentioned Martyrs and Frontiers, you know. So
well, you being eclectic, if your answer is no because you're eclectic, I mean, that underscores other things that have come up in the call about, you know, liking to explore different things. So, I mean, that's not some of these questions at the end of the call are more about either underscoring something you've already said or highlighting something that we haven't talked about, so that, you know, that gives an opportunity to then talk about it. Like, for example, you answering Mad Max and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Those are things that had not come up earlier in the call.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, in this case, it is something that came up early in the call. You like exploring different things, and that's okay.
If you do something really well, I will enjoy it. And if you're just a follower looking to jump on a trend, I will probably not like it.
So this would be the part of the call where we start talking about some of the common themes that have been coming up repeatedly. I've got some notes here, but I'm curious, Chris, what did you think you were going to suggest?
Pushing boundaries.
That's part of it.
Okay.
I see what I would call like a double major in college terms. There's sort of two big things that I think maybe subsume under one other thing, but let's start with the two big things, which I would, summarize as morality and freedom. For morality, you know, we talked about Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and, you know, doing your childhood chores and having manners and stuff like that, and helping people when, you know, it's just the right thing to do. Underneath morality, I think there's been a strong through line about angst and anger and comeuppance, which I think is your reaction to, if I'm trying to be moral, then these are the things that happen when people aren't being moral.
Right. Your response to amorality, is that a word?
Yeah.
Oh, I will be the first to admit to having moments of Schadenfreude.
Well, it's not even the Schadenfreude. Like, for example, you expressed sort of maybe displeasure is a strong word, but some element of displeasure at how much violence you saw in the punk scene, because you wanted to enjoy, you know, some of the pleasure that you could have gotten in that community, and that maybe to some degree, some of that violence in that movement maybe went against some of your morality of how you would have liked that scene to have played out. And then the other peak, if you will, of the two double major would be freedom. The first thing I think you mentioned was riding your bike was a sense of freedom. Maybe before that, you talked about how, you know, you can turn the TV off, but you can't turn off reality. You know, having the ability to walk away from something that was bothering you. Identifying with the horror punk and horror music in general. Identifying or self-identification with other people who like the same things that you did. The thrill of crossing boundaries comes under freedom too. The idea that, you know, boundaries are a bummer. So I think those two major peaks of morality and freedom. We've talked about certain things like your love of extreme sports and this, you know, the adrenaline rush and then the payoff. I'm wondering if there's maybe some sort of connection between these two peaks of morality and freedom that's related to this adrenaline rush and payoff of, you know, struggling for the mortality and then having the freedom if one succeeds, maybe.
Well, I think, I don't know if they link as much as one is, I think maybe they do. Having been an underdog a lot of my life, I know what it's like to have restrictions and unfair ones, you know, where you can't just walk down the street because a cop or the local bully decides to just disrupt your just normal, I just want to walk down the street. And I think at the base of what a lot of the morality I was raised with was, don't make somebody's life any harder. If you can make things better for someone and you have the time to do it, it should be a gimme. And at the same time, that feeds into, don't restrict someone's ability to just live their life because they're trying to figure this out the same as you are. and it's always unfair to just say no to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Because I said so. That is a terrible answer. Oh my God! The first
that's a non-answer, really.
Yeah, that's no answer. That's just an enforcement of authority. That's not the actual answer to the question. If the answer to the question is because you'll get hurt, that's an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Because I said so is just I'm the authority here, and you can suck it. And that morality of not making other people's lives worse if you don't have to, you're keeping them from finding out where they can go.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes through so much of life. Like if somebody is going hungry, they don't have any time for anything but food. If there's a war going on, that's everything. You're like, that action is restricting the freedom of their imagination and what they could do and what they could be, and every possibility becomes restricted down to survival.
Mm.
And if you can make someone's survival better, you're handing them a little slice of freedom. And if you make it worse by your actions, you're restricting their life.
Mm.
You've ruined most of their day.
So what about the topic of control? Is there something that speaks to you about that?
Yeah, usually in a negative.
I don't like it.
Mm.
No, I mean, because society as a general runs to the slowest of us, I understand the need for rules and regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Honestly, the funny thing is I used to always make fun of G.G. Allin because I thought he was the most unfree musician out there because he had to be offensive.
Yeah, you're right.
He had to be offensive. He had to do this.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't just do what he wanted to do because he had pinned himself to a wall.
Right, he had developed that image.
Yeah. He had become a prisoner of his own image.
I wonder if he ever did a show where he didn't do anything.
Right, just a spoken word.
Just,
G.G. Allen's spoken word, sitting there on a stool with a cigarette, all William Shatner style.
It's offending all the people who came to pay a show to see him be offensive, and now they're offended because he didn't do anything offensive.
It's meta. It's offensive.
Yeah. Actually, that would be deeply meta.
Yeah.
Guar comes out and does an acoustic set.
Yes.
Now everybody is violently offended by it. God, that would be the greatest prank ever.
Guar, if you're listening.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Just come out, no costumes, do a polite acoustic set, and walk off. Mm-hmm. Now that would tick some people off.
It's just they should just start out the show talking like Ira Glass from NPR. Just like, hey guys, welcome to the Guar Show.
Now this.
Oh! We should get them on Tiny Desk concerts.
Have they done Tiny Desk? I don't know. A lot of people have done Tiny Desk because Guar done Tiny Desk.
I can't imagine they have. I'll have to look it up after this.
Yeah.
Now this was a song that really meant something to me at this moment in my life. Anyway, here's "Have You Seen Me?" That would be magnificent. Oh my God. It would be. And the thing is when an artist does something like that and the crowd is furious, I'm the one in the back laughing my head off.
You're the one in the back just, yes, this is good.
Genius.
This is comedy.
Yeah.
I love the absolute genius of that. And it's like...
Yeah,
to circle back to horror, having now talked a bit about, control and I don't want to say violating boundaries, pushing boundaries, crossing boundaries, those particularly being of interest to you, the next question is why horror? Because couldn't you explore some of these things in other genres, or do you?
I write a little bit in other genres.
Mm-hmm.
I've written a little bit of sci-fi and I've written a little bit of fantasy, but horror, because we all have base fears.
Yeah.
And you can hang so much when you're operating from a position of someone's base fears, you can hang so much other stuff in there. Like you look at like a book like Swan Song by McCammon. He hangs so many moral points in there. He hangs so many different points of view, and he has your attention because he started with horror. Mm-hmm. You know, he started with you frightened of something, and it grabbed your attention enough that he can work everything else in there. You know, I often say I don't talk about my politics much online because I think the books can do it better, because I have so much more of someone's attention. So like all of my feelings about morality and being helpful and being nice and trying to remember that everybody's trying to get through this crap together, I think I can say them better in a story than I can by yelling at someone. You know, and I think really, really full in-depth horror almost always, a lot of the time, well, at least a lot of the time, has something that the writer wants to talk about that he never says, but because he's got your attention by working with your base fears, he does say. Like a Malfi book has always got little moral points in it, you know, and he never comes out and says them. He lets the actions of the character say it for him. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think you have so much more of somebody's attention with horror than you get with fantasy, where like, you know, fantasy is escapist and sci-fi is an intellectual act right in and of itself. Horror is more visceral. It's more right to the gut. You know, you've got somebody in a much, much more ingrained manner than you do in other genres.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That's kind of like what we were talking about earlier in the call, asking, you know, to set aside the auteur stuff and asking about, you know, what gets you in the gut.
It's funny. You can start with a base of spiders, really big spiders, and actually like put anything you want in from there because you've got somebody's attention who hates spiders.
Mm. Yep. That is an interesting angle that I don't think we've heard brought up on any of the earlier episodes, capitalizing on someone's attention.
I mean, even like, you know, you look at Barker, he has little points he wants to make here or there, you know, and you don't even notice him. You know, yeah. He doesn't have to beat you over the head with it. He's taking someone's skin off. At that point, he's got your attention.
I guess it depends on who the audience is, because for me, when you said Barker, my first thought was I always felt that Barker's first draw was the sex, and then the horror came after that. But that might just be because I don't really consider myself nearly as much of a horror fan as, for example, Chris or maybe you. But for me, the first thing that stood out for Barker was the sex, not the horror.
Well, I mean, I came at him from film first. And so like I mean, when Hellraiser came out, it set Gore Fiends off the charts, like as a film. Like, so I really came at Barker definitely from a horror perspective.
I'm not saying it's not there. I just felt like it was like, you know, BDSM it's sex first, then it's pain. But like I said,
can it be both at the same time?
Well,
I mean, Wrath White makes a career out of that.
We've got him on the calendar too, so
yeah, no, I mean, he does. He does a perfect, you know, like the idea of how much is too far and too far is horrific. You know, I mean, that's a lot of his writing, and you know, he does a very good job of it. Especially, his last collection, The Ecstasy of Agony, was just impeccably done.
Very cool. I've not read that.
Yeah, me either.
Well, I think we've got a pretty good summary for, you know, the stuff that you get out of horror and kind of what you want to put into it as well. Only other question I can think to ask is you know, if there's anything that you think is relevant that we haven't asked about, or maybe you thought about something earlier in the call and then the conversation took a left turn and you didn't get a chance to say it.
No, not particularly. No, I mean, you know, there's the obvious whoring aspect that my publishers are all screaming about right now. But other than that, and that's I think that's implied from me being on a podcast.
Yeah, the next thing was going to be to ask you to repeat what you're currently working on before we take the closing, but that is par for the course either way.
No, I can generally, when I'm doing a podcast and I haven't mentioned the current book enough, I can hear my publisher just like screaming somewhere.
Say something. Well,
damn it.
Yeah. We're going to put together a bio page for you and link to whatever it is that you want us to link to. So I'll be getting together with you offline either way to follow up on that stuff. But let us know what you're currently working on again, and we can link to that on the bio page and go from there.
Droplets is out right now. Cult of the Gator God is getting a re-release finally from Madness Heart Press. That's coming out next year because the original publisher was a COVID casualty. But so it's got a new edit coming, new release that'll be coming out. And like I said, Droplets is out right now. And for middle grade, there's the Haunted States of America from Macmillan Godwin.
Okay. We'll, like I said, we'll put together the bio page and link to all that stuff. And I'm guessing that other than that, they could probably Google you if they can spell your name. But
I think once you get to C, it pops up in a search automatically.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again for your time, and thank you to anybody out there listening. Please do come visit us at horrormakesUshappy.com. We've got a list of the people that we have interviewed. Paul will be on there, and also a list of people that we're looking to interview. So if you can help us get in touch with any of those, let us know. If there's anybody you'd like to have added to the list, let us know. You can also support us on Patreon, buy merch, tell a friend, do all kinds of liking and subscribing and all that fun stuff. And it's greatly appreciated.